Hello everyone, and welcome to the next edition of the Holland Land Office Museum's Artifact Video Series. My name is Ryan Duffy, I'm the director of the museum, and this week we are going to talk about Batavia's involvement in the War of 1812. Now, the War of 1812 is probably the most impactful conflict upon the history of Western New York, as much of the fiercest fighting during the war between the United States and Great Britain occurred within the Niagara frontier and right within the doorsteps of Western New York. Now, Batavia was not caught directly in the conflict, but it did play a role, and the war was nearly brought to Batavia's doorstep, though thankfully it was spared from the conflict directly. Now, the War of 1812 began in 1812, but the impact that Batavia feels actually goes to the last days of 1813. Now, in December of 1813, American troops were stationed at Fort George just over the border into Canada, but realized that their position was untenable and decided to retreat back across the border to the Niagara frontier. But before they did that, they burnt the town near the fort called Newark, which is now Niagara-on-the-Lake, and destroyed it completely, and eventually made their way back over to Fort Niagara and back into Buffalo. This drew the ire of the British forces in southern Ontario, and they resolved to get the revenge for Newark. And this occurred on December 30th, 1813, when they crossed the Niagara River and attacked the villages of Black Rock and Buffalo. Now, the American forces in the area were limited and ill-prepared for such an attack, and were driven back after some fighting and took heavy casualties along the way. And as a result, Black Rock and Buffalo were heavily damaged, or in Buffalo's case, almost completely destroyed. The village of Buffalo was basically burnt down completely, with only really one building left standing, and that was the lone brick building in the town. So this caused mass panic and hysteria throughout the entire region as refugees flooded away from Buffalo and found whatever secure place they could. And this also was the same for the American armed forces in the area, both the militia and regular troops, as they also retreated from Buffalo in many different directions, trying to find a line of defense and a place that they could hold off any further British attacks. One of those places where a lot of the refugees and soldiers retreated to was Batavia. Now, Batavia was a central location for Western New York, and it was one of the more populous areas in all of Western New York at the time, as it was the seat of the Holland Land Company and where most of the development of Western New York begins. So the refugees and troops retreated down what was known as Buffalo Road at the time, or Route 5 today. Some stopped off in Williamsville, and they made some defensive positions there. However, the bulk of the forces retreated all the way back here to Batavia. And it was here in Batavia where they would make their last stand. Now, they chose Batavia, one, because there was already an established town here, but also previously Joseph Ellicott, at the behest of the New York State governor, built a small armory and stocked it with weapons for just such an occasion. Now, this is not the armory that we hear of that was located where Tops Markets is today. This was actually located just across Tonawanda Creek on the southern side of the creek, basically at the end of where the Walnut Street footbridge is today. And this was built by Ellicott for the purpose of defending the Holland Land Company, but also the larger area around Batavia as a whole. Now, eventually the forces retreat back to Batavia, and they actually set up their headquarters in Joseph Ellicott's home, which was just about across the street from where the land office is today. Now, this is before the land office building that the museum is located in was built. The officers in command set up their headquarters at Joseph Ellicott's, and basically the Ellicott Mansion grounds became the staging grounds for the American forces in Western New York. And they built up defenses and tried to get as coordinated and organized as possible, just in case that the British would attack further east, though that attack would never come. So Ellicott also made preparations for the land company records and money, as he sent them farther east across the Genesee River so that he felt they would be safer until the crisis had passed. Now, a very important figure in American military history actually came to Batavia with that group, and that was Brigadier General Winfield Scott. Now, Scott had been badly wounded at the Battle of Lundy's Lane previously, and was brought here to Batavia to recuperate, and was actually housed in the Brisbane home at the time, and was allowed to recover over a series of weeks from his wounds. All this preparation came to naught, as the British never attacked any farther than Buffalo as they retreated back into Canada. However, much of the American forces were able to reorganize here and were prepared for the next battle that would come, and were able to protect as many of the citizens of Western New York as possible. So even though Batavia did not have a battle here, it did play an important part in the defense of Western New York during the War of 1812. And that is not to say that soldiers of the American forces did not perish here, as many troops were brought into the area from other states and other areas of New York State, and due to cold, disease, or other things, actually passed away here. And soldiers from New Jersey, their bodies were actually found buried here in Batavia in the South Lion Street Cemetery, which was the village cemetery at the time. So the effects of the War of 1812 can still sort of be seen, and it's one of the reasons why the Batavia Peace Garden is here, as it was meant to show a friendship between Canada and the United States after those few years of fighting between them. So I'd like to thank you for watching this next edition of our Artifact video series. If you had missed any of our previous ones, feel free to check them out on our YouTube channel, Holland Land Office Museum, and you can go back and watch any or all of them as you like. And we'll be making more of these in the future, so we hope that you stick around and enjoy them as we go forward.